It looks like a landing pad, or the floor of a drained swimming pool, 377 feet across. Flat, pale grey, curved just enough that rainwater runs off the edges. It sits on an island so small you can walk the length of it in about 20 minutes. There is no fence around it, no guard, no sign explaining what it is. Local fishermen sometimes pull their boats up beside it. Coconut crabs walk across the top of it, and underneath that concrete, there are 87,800 cubic meters of radioactive waste, including plutonium, an element that will remain dangerous for the next 24,000 years. This is Runit Dome, and almost everything you have heard about why it's frightening is pointing you at the wrong thing. Start with what is actually in there: 3.1 million cubic feet of contaminated soil. Roughly 35 Olympic swimming pools of it, scraped off 6 different islands. Mixed into that soil, shattered concrete, twisted metal, laboratory equipment, and the residue of the most powerful weapons the United States had ever built. There is no inventory of every object inside. There was never a manifest. Crews shoveled, trucks dumped, and the crater filled. What we do know is that plutonium is in there. And plutonium does not decay on any timescale that means anything to a human life. 24,000 years is not a warning about your grandchildren. It is a warning about a civilization that does not exist yet. To understand how it ended up under a concrete lid on an island with no fence, you have to go back 30 years earlier. Eniwetok Atoll, a ring of 40 small islands in the Central Pacific, about half the size of Manhattan in total land area. In 1947, the people who lived there, a few hundred of them, were told they would need to leave. They were moved to another atoll, Ugelang, which was smaller, drier, and could not reliably feed them. Between 1948 and 1958, the United States detonated 43 nuclear weapons at Eniwetok, 43 at one atoll, in 10 years. Some were small, one was not. In 1952, the first full-scale hydrogen bomb ever built was detonated at Eniwetok. It vaporized an entire island. Where there had been land, there was a crater in the seabed more than a mile across. And in 1958, a test called Cactus left a crater on the northern tip of Runit Island. 377 feet across, 30 feet deep. That crater is the hole. Nobody dug it. A bomb dug it. 20 years later, someone looked at that hole and had an idea. By the mid-1970s, the Eniwetok people had been in exile for nearly 30 years, and they wanted to go home. So the United States agreed to clean the atoll. And the plan was improvised almost from the beginning. Between May 1977 and May 1980, around 6,000 American servicemen were sent to Eniwetok. Not specialists, regular soldiers, sailors and airmen on ordinary rotations. They scraped contaminated topsoil off the islands, loaded it into trucks, mixed it with cement, and poured it into the Cactus crater. And here is the part that matters most, and that almost nobody mentions. The crater was never lined. There is no barrier at the bottom, no membrane, no steel, no sealed floor. The waste was poured directly onto the shattered coral at the base of a bomb crater, and coral is porous. Seawater moves through it with the tide twice a day, the way water moves through a sponge. Then they capped the top with concrete about 18 inches thick, and they went home. The cap was never designed to be permanent. It was a temporary measure while a long-term solution was decided. That decision was never made. The men who did the work were told very little. Photographs from the cleanup show soldiers in shorts and t-shirts standing in the dust. Some wore no respirators at all. Many say they were told the material was safe to handle. For decades afterwards, those men reported cancers, blood disorders, and illnesses that arrived early and in clusters. And for decades, most of them could not get help. Compensation for radiation exposure depends on your military records. and their records frequently said they had not been exposed. The Department of Veterans Affairs now presumes exposure for personnel who served in the cleanup between 1977 and 1980. But the Enuitak cleanup crews were, for a long time, excluded from the same healthcare benefits given to servicemen who witnessed the actual weapons tests. Legislation to close that gap has been introduced repeatedly. As of 2026, veterans of that cleanup are still waiting. 6,000 men filled the hole. Many of them spent the rest of their lives trying to prove they had been there. The dome is now more than 40 years old. Cracks run across the concrete. That is documented, and it is not disputed. The Marshall Islands is one of the lowest-lying nations on Earth. Most of its land sits around 2 meters above sea level. Runit Dome was built in the 1970s for a Pacific that no longer exists, before anyone was designing coastal structures around rising seas and intensifying storms. And under the 1986 agreement that made the Marshall Islands independent, responsibility for the dome passed to the Marshall Islands, a country of about 40,000 people with no nuclear industry of its own, now formally owns a structure it did not build, containing waste it did not produce from weapons it did not want. This is the point in the story where most accounts stop. A cracking tomb, a rising ocean, a poor nation left holding it. It is a powerful image. It is also, according to the people who have actually measured it, a misdirection. In 2015, a research team led by marine radiochemist Ken Bursela of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution went to Enuitak and measured the water and the sediment. They expected the dome to be the dominant source of contamination. That is not what the numbers said. The plutonium sealed under Runit Dome amounts to roughly 1% of the plutonium sitting in the sediments of the lagoon around it. 1%. Inside, 99% is already outside, spread across the lagoon floor where it has been since the 1950s. Never collected, never contained, never covered by anything at all. Buesela's team found that the levels in the water fall below United States and international water quality standards. A 2016 Columbia University study measured background radiation at Enuitak and found it lower than in New York City's Central Park, where the granite bedrock is naturally radioactive. Buesela swam in the lagoon. His conclusion was that the dome is, in his words, a significant visible scar on the landscape, but a relatively small source of radioactivity. This does not mean the story is fine. It means the story is worse in a different direction. Everyone is watching the lid. The lid holds 1%. The dome is frightening because it looks frightening. It is a grey concrete dome full of nuclear waste on a tropical island, and it photographs like the end of the world. So it became the symbol, and the symbol absorbed all the attention. Meanwhile, the actual bulk of the contamination was never put in a container at all. It was left where the bombs left it, and the injury that is most clearly unresolved is not a leak. It is the exile of the Enuitak people. It is 6,000 cleanup veterans still filing paperwork. It is a nation of 40,000 people made legally responsible for the debris of somebody else's arms race. The dome does need monitoring. Buesela says so himself, and sea level rise makes the long term genuinely unpredictable. But if you are frightened of Runit Dome specifically, you are frightened of the one part of this that somebody actually put a lid on. There is a photograph taken from the air looking straight down at Runit Island. You can see the dome, pale grey, perfectly circular, unmistakable. And around it, that impossible blue-green Pacific water. It looks like a coin dropped in a swimming pool. Everything in that photograph that looks dangerous is under the concrete. Everything that actually is dangerous is in the blue part. If you want to know what else got buried and then quietly handed to somebody else, subscribe. There is more of this than any